Morning. I'd like to call the February 18th, 2016 Planning Commission to order and let the record show that all of the commissioners are here except for Mr. Allered. At this time, would you join me with a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move this over. Thank you very much. Do we have any agenda changes?
No, we do not.
No agenda changes. So next is our public comment period. If there's somebody that would like to address the Planning Commission on a land use item that is not on our agenda this morning, this would be your opportunity.
Good morning to the Commission. I'm Bill McManus of the Calaveras Project. After Tuesday's meeting, if you can call it that, with the Board of Supervisors in San Andreas, enough new material has come up that I will be renewing my efforts to take advantage of my segments 3 minutes at a time, before and after this meeting and before the board, to try to bring you some depth and understanding of what happened on Tuesday. I'm not sure of all of myself. There was a lot of confusion, and I'll be getting hopefully a transcript from the board clerk of who voted in which direction and on what. What we'll start off with today is that it's my understanding that the board did not make changes to the draft ordinance regarding marijuana growing in the rural residential zoning category. And in fact, I think it was on indoor growing, expanded it into R1 or allowed it in R1 or decreased or lowered the threshold for approval from CUP to AUP. Mr. Maurer can correct me on that. I'm not saying it for fact. There's too much. What troubles me about this is that allows marijuana growing in rural residential neighborhoods where, for example, on 1 acre parcels, they could have up to 11,000 square feet of marijuana growing, which is approximately 1,000 plants. The setback for that grow from the property line remains at 30 feet, which is not enough to control the odor of marijuana and will potentially ruin that neighborhood or anyone trying to use their property. In addition to that, I don't know what the status of it is. Again, Mr. Maurer could probably address it at the appropriate time. The cartels are asking that they be allowed to put their grows in the Williamson Act. I don't know how that's going to go. Additionally, the cartels are asking that right to farm laws be applied to them. And the reason for doing that, as much as I can determine, is that under right to farm, the nuisance of their stinking crop would not be an actionable condition for someone to complain about. So it would be the same as living next to a dairy. Unfortunately, what they're doing is trying to, the right to farm was put in to prevent the encroachment of dwellings into an agricultural area and then have an effect on agriculture. What they're doing is just the opposite. We have a residential area and they're bringing a nuisance ag crop into the area and want protection from that. Additionally, the board considered, I don't know if they passed it or not, a 3-year extension for people in the burn area who can plant marijuana for the next 3 years without having to build a dwelling, which is required by the ordinance in order to have an outdoor grow. So there was no mention of the fact that a lot of those property owners have already sold their property. They didn't have insurance, they got burned out, they took their settlement and they left, they sold the property. So I don't know if there's going to be any restriction for new owners to take advantage of the 3-year extension to grow marijuana without having to build a dwelling. In any case, the property will be used for growing marijuana and will not have the higher value reflected in the property tax assessment because the house is gone. So this is just part one of many confusing things, and I just want to alert you to it. I'll be open to discussion either privately or in session or whatever we can do to try to make some sense of what they've done. On a brighter note, am I almost out of time?
You have about a minute left.
Huh?
Minute.
1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay. On a brighter note, I think that from what I heard, as far as dispensaries, the board recommended that they take out the C1 and C2 provision for dispensaries, and so they would remain in a CP zoning only. So like I say, that's what I heard, and I don't know if that's correct. But in any case, it seems like a very liberal, expansive, pot-friendly ordinance was expanded to be even more liberal, more expansive, and more pot-friendly would be, in my opinion, that's my appraisal of it. So I will be here. We're going to go through this. And, anything I can do to help you try to understand it, if I can, I'll do it. So on that note, I know I'm out of time, Madam Chair, so I will thank you for the time and just mention that this is to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we're going to move on to the public hearing, which is a continuation of our review of the general plan update. And we are talking this morning, and probably for quite a while today, about the circulation element, which was continued from February 11th. So I think with that, do you have a preliminary comments, Peter?
Just some brief comments. Again, the circulation element is one of the mandatory elements of the general plan pursuant to state law. There are provisions in state law of what needs to be in it. I attached that for you in the packet. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm a little less focused than I would normally like to be. In the packet, you have the draft, revised draft. These are edits that I made based on the public comments received last spring. There is attachment 2 is the copy of the government code that directly deals with the circulation element. Commissioner Trino submitted comments to me and asked that they be included in the packet so that everyone could see his comments. And that's attachment 3. We also received a number of, or a few comments via email in the last week. I think you probably all received Joyce Tekel's comments from a couple days ago. There were a handful of emails that we got last night that I passed out from cyclists that expressed concern about the plan and addressing cycling. So, no, I think let's just dive into it. It's probably the best course of action here.
Okay. We shall dive away. So we will start with page 1, which is the introduction.
Maybe there's one thing I should talk, just sort of provide some framework. The circulation element is very closely linked with the land use element. And as changes are made to the land use, obviously it affects the traffic patterns and the need for infrastructure improvements. We ran, in the document, there were a set of 3 maps that showed the existing circulation system, the roads that we've identified as being arterials and collectors, the effect of expected growth using some modeling that was developed with the county, Caltrans, COG, and UC Davis, which was then put into a traffic model by our traffic consultant, Fair and Peers, to say, okay, if this develops out at this rate, we're expecting that growth would be sort of logically, concentrated in certain locations. here's the traffic that would result from that, and here are the road improvements that would be necessary. So figure 2 shows where the traffic based on that growth would reduce the roads to below the level service standard that we have of LOSC in the rural areas and D in the community areas. The third figure shows the improvements that would be necessary to accommodate that growth and bring it back up to meet our standards. So there's that direct correlation between land use and circulation as it relates to roads. That then gets into the financing aspect of how do you pay for that. And there are a number of policies in the plan that talk about various fee programs and new development paying for infrastructure that's necessary to serve that development. And that's really sort of the basis of how the county will fund future road improvements, and it's sort of the ongoing balancing act of fees sufficient to support the development, but not being so high as to discourage development, and trying to find that fine line. One of the concerns that has been expressed is that we haven't updated our fees in recent time, and I think that's something that we definitely will need to do, and there's implementation measures that says that we will look at it and we'll update the fees and review them regularly so that they keep pace with inflation or in some cases deflation, which is rare but can occur. So it's important that we look at, there's a snapshot in time today. We cannot put improvement or the fixing of current deficiencies on the backs of new development. The fees, you can only require new development to pay for their share of improvements. And so that's always the struggle that we have when development has occurred over a long period of time and there are existing road deficiencies. Unless the population steps up and says, yes, we're willing to pay for a transportation tax or something like that, you can't put that burden on the new residents, the new developers. They can only be charged their fair share of the impacts. And so it's always a struggle that communities have everywhere of where there is deficiencies in the system of how do you fund that. And it has to come out of the current resources that we have or general taxes. And Calaveras County, like many rural counties, are sort of reluctant to tax themselves. So that's just one of the dilemmas that we're facing. The county or the state has broadened its scope in its view of transportation over the past number of years. One of the sort of the terms of art that's used these days are complete streets, and it's really the concept of looking at all of the users of the transportation system. People that walk, people that might ride their bikes, transit users, as well as the automobile. Granted, we are very reliant on the automobile here in this county. We're dispersed, we're widely separated, and the population density is so low that you don't have the capability to have a robust transit system. We do the best we can. It's highly subsidized because not everyone has a car, not everyone can drive, and so we do have a transit system that you see the buses running around. It's not widely used, but for those who do use it, it's very valuable and necessary for them to be able to get around. The state has put carrots and sticks into the process of funding road improvements, particularly in the state highway system. And the state highways are our primary arterial roads. We've got Highway 4, 49, 12, 26. That's the bulk of the travel routes that people use in this county. They hold the purse strings for most of those road improvements. So it's important that while we don't like Big Brother, we don't like the state telling us what to do, but they also pay the bills in many cases. So we have to ensure that not only does the concept of looking at all of these things, which is sort of the new mission of Caltrans, but also state law says we have to do that. So there's very clear mandates to review, to consider alternative forms of transportation and cycling. I think that where we can take advantage of that is within our communities, so that we have interconnectedness between the hospital, the school, the parks, people that live in San Andreas, for example. They can get to that place without having to get in their car. Now, most people may choose to get in their car. We obviously want to have that's what I'm looking for. Robust, evolved, well-organized road system for automobiles. And we look at where do we have traffic problems, how do we fix those, what kind of programs do we have in place to look at places like the intersection out here at Mountain Ranch Road and 49. Anyone who's been trying to get out of here at around 5 o'clock lately knows it's backed up all the way past the hospital on some days. And so we have to look at those things, but we have to look beyond just the vehicular traffic and looking at how we can accommodate other needs. So that's where this this element and this version of the draft is trying to look at that broad picture. We understand that the bulk of the trips made by people in the county are by automobile. It's still going to be the major form of transportation. But we do want to provide the opportunities within communities and interconnecting communities as well. It doesn't mean a bicycle trail going, from West Point to Copperopolis, but it means that within West Point or within Copperopolis, and maybe in some certain key locations, there are routes that people can safely ride their bike, get to school, get to shopping, without having to get in a car all the time. So there's sort of a broad overview of what we're looking at.
That prompts a question, actually. Sort of taking off on some of Joyce Deckel's comments. And I'm going to oversimplify what she had to say, but part of it at least was there is missing from here and from the background report information about the current condition of the roads that we have and unfunded projects that have been identified to fix that. Concerns about the lack of funds to do these things, and concerns about how we would allocate funds that are available amongst different projects. And my question sort of generally is, to what extent, if at all, do you think that those questions and concerns should be answered by more material in this draft?
I think it's sort of a two-pronged question. Is one, do you have enough information? Do we have enough information to know where the deficiencies are, and what additional information we need on which we're basing this plan on. I believe that we have the information necessary to make the plan. We've worked closely with the Department of Public Works, with Caltrans, to look at our circulation system. We've reviewed various other documents that are referenced in the plan, as far as some of the local mobility plans, some of which have been adopted, some of which have not, to look at where the needs are. I think the second part of your question was, is it adequately funded? And I think that's a separate question that isn't necessarily, well, in the big picture it's relevant to the general plan, but it goes beyond that, it's actually an implementation. Have we adequately, have we complied with our plan as far as ensuring that the funding is keeping pace with the development and the infrastructure needs of the county? And that gets then into capital improvement plans and funding priorities and reviewing the fee structure to ensure that it's adequate to meet the needs.
Thank you.
Sort of piggybacking on that, when your response was, do we have enough information to know where the deficiencies are? And it seems to me that with the maps, we know where the deficiencies will be with the proposed development, but I don't know that we have enough information to know where the deficiencies currently exist. And is that important to understand that in drafting the policies, goals, policies, implementation measures of this update of the circulation element? I think that's what Joyce was getting
Yeah.
at too.
As far as the standards that are established in the plan, I think we do. It's been noted that the one area that is deficient right now under both the Caltrans standard as well as the counties is the stretch of Highway 26, west of Valley Springs. And Caltrans recognizes that that's, it's deficient. They and through this plan has said, that's the cost of fixing that road to bring it up to a LOSC is more than the value of those improvements, and are willing to let it stay at LOSD. And that then is a policy call by the county. I mean, there are certain intersection improvements that are known. I mentioned out here at 49, the 1226 intersection in Valley Springs, which was recently improved. Those are sort of known choke points in traffic. The fact that the figure 1 shows the roads that are, existing road system, and figure 3 or figure 2 shows what would be impacted, leads me to believe that while we don't have any deficiencies that are below our threshold other than some intersection improvements that we know about. I think that there will be times when there's localized traffic problems. You have slowdowns because of trucks on highways and limited ability to pass, but that still doesn't reduce it down to below the level of service. I could certainly provide additional information as far as what the Department of Public Works has as far as sort of a list of ongoing areas that need improvement, if that's something you would find helpful in this, with this.
I don't know. I mean, I'm asking the question. And also, is some of this in the technical background report, this level of detail?
Well, there wasn't much, if anything at all, in the technical background report regarding transportation, and that's one of the things that we worked on to try to provide additional information. We developed more information. I debated whether or not to have that back on before we got in the circulation element, but then we had some technical problems of getting that all packaged together. So I said, well, let's keep things rolling and have this. I should have the technical background report available with additional information regarding circulation next week sometime, and so I'll distribute that to you, as well as we'll have it posted online for the public to review. And as we continue our review of this element, I'd be very surprised if we get through it today, just knowing how thorough that we've been on the review. So that might help as we continue our review of the circulation element to have that additional information. I mean, it makes sense to have the background report before you dive into the details of the policy language and the rest of the plan.
Well, because in a way, it makes sense that would be the appropriate place for it, because just identifying where those, those trouble areas are, but the policies and how to address those troubled areas are more generic in nature, and that doesn't matter whether the trouble area is in McCollum Hill or San Andreas, but there's a policy about how they would be addressed. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with seeing what the technical background report has to say on providing some of the narrative on existing deficiencies. You guys good with that? Kind of?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of Peter right now before we?
I have a question on 3. The
Three,
CR. figure
oh, the
3.
map.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the proposed widening to 4 lanes of 26 between Valley Springs, it looks like it stops at Vista del Lago. Is that right? As near as I can tell from the drawing. Am I right about that? Or, I mean, I don't have a close-up view, so is that going all the way to Baldwin, or is that Vista del Lago, or where is that?
I don't recall that was going to be needed to be widened 4 lanes.
It's
Oh, there it is, let's see.
yellow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a pretty,
Pardon?
the scale such that it
I know.
is
Yes,
hard.
I need a,
That's-
I think it
yes,
goes all the way to
yes.
Moke Hill. Yeah.
No, that's between 12 and Vista del Lago, that's correct.
okay.
I was looking at the wrong map, that's why I was confused.
Has that been a proposal that's been on the books for a long time, or what do you know about that?
As far as I know, that's not a proposal today at all. What this says is that based on the expected growth and the need to maintain the level of service that we've designated, that would need to be improved to need to be widened 4 lanes. Some point in time during the development of this plan, or during the timeframe of the plan, that if growth occurs where we expect it, at the rate we expect it, that at some point in time within the next 20 years, that will need to be widened to accommodate that growth. It's not there today, it's not something that's planned in, but it's something that will be necessary based on the land use pattern of this plan.
Okay, but the confusing part for me is that the growth seems to me for that section is already there. Now, Rancho, where I live, can fill in, right? There's lots of empty lots, so the population could grow. But La Cantena is built out. Gold Creek is built out. Where would the growth occur that anticipates this needed improvement?
There are some large parcels sort of in the triangle between 12 and 26 that would have some of that growth. A lot of it is just that infill you're talking about, that as the people that are on the outskirts of that, they are going to be funneling into Valley Springs and maybe using those as commute routes as well. So if you're if you're building in Paloma, say, for example, that traffic is going, some of that traffic is going to go down into Valley Springs, maybe on into Stockton or to Lodi, and using those routes. So it's a combination of localized growth as well as dispersed growth that funnels through those main corridors. Just as, if you look at that map, it shows improvements necessary to Highway 4. That's to accommodate development that may occur, not necessarily in Vallecito, but around Murphy's and Arnold, that's funneling down towards Angels Camp and on, down to Modesto area. So it's looking at the whole of the traffic pattern, the whole sort of dendritic system of all these roads that funnel down to major arterials.
Well, okay. We know that the circulation element is tied to land use.
Yeah.
But when it comes to these kinds of future needs, to what extent does it filter down to building codes, for example, so that you have your setbacks anticipating that this is probably going to happen someday? Because right now, you've got a real problem if you tried to make that 4 lanes.
Well, that's something that we would want to do, is to reserve that right-of-way, or at least preserve it by not allowing people to build. We know that we need to widen the road, and right now we only have, say, 60 feet of right-of-way, and we're going to need to have 100 feet or 120 feet to accommodate a 4-lane road. We don't want to have houses built within, close up that, so that either it prohibits our ability, or we're going to have to use eminent domain and condemn and remove homes. It's the last thing we want to do. So the county could pass an ordinance that says where we know we need to widen roads, that we adopt a greater setback to accommodate future acquisition of right-of-way. And that's been done in other jurisdictions, I know.
Also, on that same issue, the section of 12 that's highlighted there is suggested that it would be widened to add a passing lane. Okay, that's in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I assume that's the passing lane is it changes in terms of who gets to use it, right? Which direction, depending on, you're going uphill, so there's a passing lane.
Right, it doesn't mean that that entire stretch of road would have passing lanes. It means that somewhere along there will be one or more passing lanes to accommodate
Okay.
that, the slow vehicles.
So it was a little odd to me that the 12 would get these passing lanes, these intermittent passing lanes, whereas the 26 would get the 4-lane. Does the traffic study really show that the 26 needs a 4-lane section there, whereas the 12 does not?
That's according to the modeling that was done by the traffic consultants, yes.
That it's counterintuitive to me, unless the traffic people would say, because 26 is a shorter route to Stockton from that intersection, that's where you need the heavier traffic, because like you say, it's not just the people who live in there, it's the use of that road by other people.
Right,
converging.
much bigger traffic shed, yes.
It's counterintuitive to me, but if the traffic study model shows that, okay.
The other thing, Caltrans has put a tremendous amount of money into Highway 26 over the last few years in terms of taking out, straightening out curves and widening, and, it could be reflective of that too. I don't know.
I know they have.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because when you look at the miles, the difference, it's about 5 or 6 miles difference to get to Stockton from 26 versus 12.
Right.
That's assuming you don't want to go to Lockford. All right.
Now, while we're on maps, figure CIR1, which is the existing circulation system,
Uh-huh.
was that drawn up by the traffic consultants, or is that done by Public Works, or who prepared this?
This was data from our GIS system, so data from Department of Public Works, and then the exhibit was prepared by the consultant.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if some of this is very accurate. For example, if you look at the road that's shown in green as a major collector between Milton and the intersection on the map with Hogan Dam Road. In other words, Rock Creek Road between Milton and the intersection of Hogan Dam Road. That's called a major collector. There is very little traffic on that road.
So
It is
these are
very steep.
road classifications according to the county's, what's the term, classification system. And a number of roads, I mean, you look at Hogan Dam Road, which is a dirt road for much of that, Minor Collector 2. The county has designated certain routes as collectors in order to qualify those roads for federal funding.
So
And
it's
so-
not
so-
reflective of the amount of traffic
Not
on
necessarily
them.
effective,
Yeah.
reflecting on the amount of traffic.
Or the
It's a
conditions
little
on
bit
Right.
misleading and confusing because of that. And I think that, unfortunately, there really isn't any other mechanism to classify those roads. We could look at, there's, vehicle count rates or something like that. I just don't know that we have the data. So this is reflective of the technical classification of these roads as the county has designated them for the purposes of federal and state funding programs.
Then maybe we should say that, because when I look at this, I mean, I thought major collector, no way.
Well, and this
If you're
became,
talking about anything in the real world.
yeah, and this became a big issue with Calvaritas Road last spring because of the Calvaritas Bridge issue. That people look at it and say, well, that's not, a collector road. And I'll run out there sometime after work, and there's very little traffic on it at all, even during, the commute hour. So I understand that, and it's, maybe we need to clarify that. I think that's a good idea.
On the map.
A note on the map,
Right,
or at least
right.
where we reference those maps and describe that better.
Because somebody like me, just reading this, thinks this can't be right.
Right, so it actually calls into subject the rest of it. It's like, what, are they crazy?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point is in the text and a reference on the map where what those classification means.
Okay, are we on the introduction?
I think
I think so.
There's a reference here in the second paragraph where it says, it also addresses transportation funding and the concept of complete streets within communities. And complete streets shows up later in the policies. But I'm not able to find an actual definition of it. And I'm wondering, does complete streets refer to this requirement in Government Code Section 56302, B2A?
Yeah, about the holistic approach, that it's not just cars. That's what, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we should say that someplace, because when we have policies that incorporate that, and it's not a defined term, to me, it wasn't very clear.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
I thought that I had added some discussion of
And I
that.
thought it might have been in your in the staff memo too, because I
Maybe it was in
did,
the
I know
memo.
it has to do with Caltrans.
Well, there's a reference on page 9, under bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian travel, that does describe that state law, but it doesn't tell us that's what complete streets is.
Right, and even so, it should be in the introduction, so so you get that before you get to the first reference to it. Yeah,
That would be my preference.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other? The only thing I had on the third paragraph where the sentence that says, there are limited opportunities for alternatives, and then it says to the private automobiles, so I think it might be alternative to the use of private automobiles.
Where was that?
The third paragraph, third sentence, there are limited opportunities for alternatives, and then it says to the private automobiles, might be to the use of private automobiles.
That makes sense.
Any other comments on the introduction?
No.
Okay. Shall we move on to overview? And road, are all the background and setting associated plans and documents? Page 2. Whoever's got something, just go ahead and,
I don't have anything.
okay,
I don't have anything till we get to page 4.
okay. And I've got one on 4 too, so why don't you go, is anybody else, anything before 4?
No.
Okay, so Kelly, why don't you give us your,
Okay, at the bottom of page 4, the paragraph that's entitled Road Maintenance includes transient occupancy taxes as a source of funding for county and state maintained roads. There's a comment from Joyce Teckel that says the county doesn't have a TOT, City of Angels does, and I'm wondering if this is accurate.
I was hoping to verify one way or the other that. I didn't get a chance to this morning. My understanding was that we do have a TOT. It's quite low compared to other communities, but we do collect TOT.
The
Yeah.
TOT
It's been
rate
discussed
is,
quite extensively.
well, the
over-
rate is 6%. We do have a TOT. But I think where Joyce is referencing is in what I was picking up is that even though we have a TOT, there is no set place for the TOT funds to go other than the general plan. There's an MOU in place that talks about how it was supposed to be dispersed, but that hasn't been followed. So
So it just goes in the general fund.
So it
It's not
goes into the-
necessarily earmarked
And
specifically
in order
for.
to change that funding mechanism and make it go towards public works funds or to disperse it in a certain way, it would have to go back to the voters because when it was originally voted on, it didn't have a placement for those funds.
Right. So a general tax that goes into the general fund requires 50% of the voters to 50 plus 1. A specialized tax, that if it were earmarked just for road improvements or any other program, requires 2/3 vote. And so I can imagine why the county would have decided to just have it a general fund and then utilize that money. It can be used for road improvements, but it's not required to be used for road improvements.
And you can't designate that without going back to the voters the way it was originally on the ballot. So should we?
So I don't know that just like property taxes, it is a source of revenue
and could be used,
and could be used, but it's not necessarily earmarked for that purpose.
or will be used.
Yeah, the money didn't go away. It just, what the county establishes its priorities, it can
Right.
still use 2/3 of that. It gets to use all of that.
Right. And I think Joyce Teckel, her comment was she didn't believe we had one, the county had one at all.
Yeah.
And
I don't know why that came about, because it's been very public. It's been in the newspaper. It was a heated discussion in the board over the last.
No, well, they were trying to increase it, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
whole increase issue
Right.
has been pretty
Right.
widely publicized.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to get into a political debate on that, but
No,
I think
but I
the
think-
reason is that when they were trying to bring it forward, the funds were being used for things other than tourism, and the people that collect those funds felt like it should go back into the public services, the roadways, and like the visitor centers, but that's not how the money was being grabbed. So they couldn't get the support behind it because they were trying to split it so many ways. It's not to say that that still won't come forward, but, it is something to be looking at into the future, as everybody knows. We are low on our transient occupancy tax. I believe Angels Camp is 10%. But as far as leaving it in here, because that was one of the things I was looking at too, there is an MOU that is a third split between public roads, emergency services, and general fund, or the, visitor center. So it was split on an MOU, but our county got into some financial tightness, and the money had to be adjusted accordingly, which it had the ability to do.
So I think that it's
I don't have an issue with it
Right,
being here,
right,
just
that
to
it's-
encourage our supervisors to be looking at the fact we could really use those
Right.
funds towards some public works.
So the question was, do we have one? I think the answer is
Yes.
yes. And then it's still on the books as a possible source for funding.
Yeah, I'm fine with it staying in there, just as
Okay.
an encouragement to be using those funds that way if we can.
The only other comment I had was in the paragraph above where it says, and several benefit basin fees. I mean, don't we just have two?
There are
Or are there a lot?
I thought there were two.
3 of them, I think. And that was something that we're adding that background information. There's a map that's in the technical background report. There's Bret Hart Basin, there is Valley Springs Benefit Basin. There was a third one.
So if we know that there's 3, couldn't we just say 3? Instead of several? I mean, I don't know, it's small, but still, it's more specific.
We could do that. Yeah.
The state would like the word several better,
Why?
because it looks better than three.
It doesn't matter.
Right, yeah.
The state has no interest in that. That's,
Yeah.
that's a local funding system that we have.
Well,
and-
then if you could put multiple,
Yeah.
right?
I think when,
plethora.
yeah. If I recall, when I wrote this, I wasn't sure the
How
numbers,
many?
so I put several in until
Yeah.
I got that information. So I'll be exact with
Okay.
that.
Especially if we're going to have a map,
Yeah.
that shows where they are. All right, we good with that section? Are we moving on? Okay, public transit. Wait a minute. Page 9?
Yeah.
Did I miss something? Oh, the
5,
maps
6,
were.
7, and 8 are the maps.
Okay. I ripped mine out. Yeah, page
Oh,
9.
we're almost done, we're halfway through.
So again, if anybody has any comments, just,
Nine, I missed that page. Where is yours?
anything on public transit?
I have a note here, let me quickly. Mr. Mauer reacted to a lot of my notes, which I thank him for. I just had a few others, but I have to make sure I know what's left over and what wasn't. My note, Peter, was about adding as a goal to widen roads to create a shoulder so that the shoulder serves two purposes. It's a safety factor, right? The person can get off the road when they need to. It's a safety factor when a person is, for a driver swerving to miss an issue. They
Where are you exactly?
on public transit? Pardon me, yeah.
Because I don't see where it talks about road widening, or there's a comment you said you provided about road widening, shoulders, or? I'm just not
Was it in
seeing
the
it.
policy? Because I'm not sure either. Was it in the
I thought he
policies?
was talking gold.
Because there were 2, I'm looking at your page 9 comments, and you had one comment about the transit system had expanded since that was first written. And then under bike ped and equestrian, you had a comment about seniors and the practicality of longer trips by sidewalk or bicycle.
So perhaps this is a new comment you've got.
No, this is something else. This is maybe I've got it in the wrong place. I've got that all, I'm fine with that.
This is what you had on the
Now, this was a different note that's not in there. And I think I just put it in the wrong place. On connections to the colleges, we pay a fee to Delta College District, correct?
A portion of the county is in the Yosemite district, so the south end, those if you're in Angels Camp or the Highway 4 corridor, students can attend Columbia College. The rest of the county is in the district that Delta is in. I don't know the name of the district.
Can you describe that to me again?
So a portion of the county is within the Yosemite Community College District that, and they go to Columbia College.
That's Columbia.
The rest of the, is in the, I don't know if it's Los Rios or whatever the community college district that Delta is in. And so the students that would go to, and so we pay, our taxes go to support those two different districts depending on where we live in the county. So that's the only funding mechanism that I'm aware of as far as paying for those colleges.
The funding mechanism that supports a bus trip to Delta, does that come, is that a different funding source than the rest of the transit system? Or is it earmarked for that particular route? Is it-
I'm seeing a head nodding from Amber Collins from the COG, who probably knows a lot more about that than I do. So yes, there's a separate, different funding source for that than the rest of the
And does that go-
localized transit system.
And is there a different one, because I don't live up there, is there a different one that goes over to Columbia and is funded the same way?
I don't know the answer to that.
Can we let her speak
Sure.
to that?
Amber, could you come up and?
Amber Collins with the Calaveras Council of Governments. Yeah, there's, most of the transit system is funded through the Transportation Development Act, which is state funding. The service that goes now to Stockton is through Federal Transportation Administration funds. So it's a special funding source for an intercity bus service.
Administered by who?
The FTA, Federal Transportation Administration.
Not through a state agency, just straight from the feds?
Well, it goes through the Caltrans.
Caltrans.
Administers that funding, but it's federal funding.
And to get to Delta College on this bus, where do the students, where does it pick them up?
I believe it goes from San Andreas through Valley Springs. It'll stop in, at La Quintana in Valley
Yeah, yeah.
Springs, and then goes down 26.
And then to go to Columbia College, it assumes that their students are being, where are students being picked up there?
They can take any route coming from, Valley Springs, 49, or from Arnold down to Angels Camp, and then the bus goes from Angels Camp out to Columbia from Angels.
Okay, so that means students from Valley Springs can go to Columbia, they just have to take the bus
Yes,
that way and then transfer it over to a different bus.
yes, that's correct.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry, so if I understood that correctly, we do have a bus going to Delta College?
Yes, it just started operating in December, January? When did it start operating? January.
Can we add that in here?
Yes, I added it in.
It is in there.
I don't see it.
First paragraph,
And Delta
Jackson,
College.
Abercrombie, and Delta College in Stockton.
I'm looking at the wrong one. It is in there, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
The updated one.
So was there a question, or was that was it?
That was it.
Commissioner Tuno on public transit? Are we moving on? Okay. Bicycle, pedestrian, equestrian travel.
I have two comments on the first paragraph. The third sentence says users include motor vehicle drivers, bicyclists, children, seniors, and so forth. It leaves out movers of commercial goods, which is also included in the statute. I would think that movers of commercial goods that bring us our food and our fuel and other things ought to have equal dignity with bicyclists and therefore be included.
Well, they are a motor vehicle driver.
The legislature also provides for motorists separate from movers of commercial goods.
Sure.
See no problem with
I don't
adding that.
either.
So motor vehicle drivers, movers of commercial goods, bicyclists, et cetera.
And the other suggestion, which is just purely optical, is the last paragraph, speaking of Caltrans's Complete Streets Policy, I take it addresses Caltrans's policy as opposed to what state law requires of the counties, and if that's the case, to me, it would be clearer if that was just a separate paragraph.
Excuse
This
me.
is on the very last
Which paragraph
paragraph?
are you talking about?
The last sentence of the first paragraph.
Oh, last sentence of the first paragraph. And I'm sorry, what was your comment again?
I'm assuming that that last sentence that refers to Caltrans's Complete Streets Policy is referring to something different than what California Government Code 56302 requires of the counties. And if so, it would be clearer if it was just a separate paragraph to set it off.
I guess I saw it as interrelated, and since much of the funding that comes to the county comes through Caltrans, that our ability to receive funding and make the road improvements that we need, utilizing, statewide funds as well as local funds, is tied to their review of grant applications and meeting the complete streets concept.
I think that answers it, because I took it to mean their policy as to their highways,
No,
and it's
all
broader than that.
interconnected.
Okay. I have nothing else till we get to the last paragraph.
I've
on
got
that
something
page.
on the third paragraph, the last sentence where it says, both bicycle and pedestrian facilities are discontinuous, making, and then it takes longer trips challenging. Just a suggestion that both bicycle and pedestrian facilities are discontinuous, making connections to key destinations challenging, and then in paren, like schools, employment, medical centers.
Say that again, please, Vaughn.
So
Making connections,
making connections to key destinations challenging. And then in parens, I mean, those key destinations, I think, is what we're really kind of getting at, which is schools, employment, and for potentially anyone, medical centers.
Well, now that we're on that sentence, I do have a suggestion, because this refers to challenging for seniors and persons with disabilities, and we have received some messages that point out that there are seniors who are very capable of making long trips. And so I don't know that we need to be modifying this by saying for seniors and persons with disabilities. It's just challenging, period.
I would agree, because I think it is, I mean, if you take from any little community and you're trying to get to the hospital in San Andreas, it is discontinuous for every individual, not just a particular classification.
Well, that's what I was trying to do, saying that the connections are challenging, not particularly saying it's challenging what class of people it's challenging for, but it's just challenging. And those challengers, I mean, there's particularly for people, for going to what I call key destinations, whether you're going to a work, whether you're going to school, or maybe you're going to the doctor.
I'm fine with that. I just think we ought to put a period after challenging.
Just period.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah. So it would say both bicycle and pedestrian facilities are discontinuous, making connections to key destinations challenging. Good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, good.
Anything else on bicycle, pedestrian, equestrian?
Yes, last paragraph on
Okay.
page C9. This is just purely grammatical.
Wait a minute, last paragraph on page 9. Okay.
Right. The second sentence reads, with the exception of the Murphy's plan, none of these have been adopted. Have needs to be has. Then it goes on, adopted by the county, but are available, should say, but all are available.
Well, what? But all?
but all are available.
And maybe instead of but just say and all are available?
That would be better yet.
Yeah. Anything more? Or aviation while we're on that page?
Nothing more on that page.
And nothing on aviation?
Not from me.
Okay.
Not anything additional.
All right. Shall we, before we dig into the goals and policies, have public comment on the, see if there is any? So at this time, if there's anyone in the public that would like to provide your comments on this, on the first couple of sections of circulation, which would be the introduction, background setting, and associated plans and documents.
Pages 1 through 10.
Pages 1 through 10, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dave Haley. I represent Castle and Cook. Our concern is, and I'm not sure if this is in the introduction or where it fits within the circulation element, but it appears to me that it should be in the front end because it's very important. Community centers is where where most of the growth is to occur in the future. In community centers, such as Copper, as an example, growth is really not defined as to which projects come before each other ones. Example, Oak Canyon Ranch was approved, now delayed. Other projects want to go forward. And so as the state general plan guidelines recommends a longer term circulation plan for the major arterials, longer term meaning 35 to 40 years. So when we develop each project, it fits within a concept that you could get to all land areas within a community boundary area. That way, we can evolve roads and keep it into a country character instead of splintering out projects, some of which are forced into 4 lanes with traffic signals when it's not necessary. You know, if you had a longer term approach, you could define the likely arterials and collector roads so that when a land area is approved and developed, it could evolve within that context. In addition, your comments this morning was existing people have to pay for their own problems. You can't lay that on future development. Future development can help that process if we are developing within a long-term concept. So we feed our communities or developments within a arterial system that works for all land masses so that when they come online, it all makes sense. And we could fund them accordingly and develop them accordingly in pieces. Each project can fund their own fair share along the way instead of one project that's already approved or so has a concept, doesn't go forward, another project comes online and there's no concept. So I think it's important to follow the state guidelines and have a long-term concept, long-term circulation element for community centers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Colleen Platt, myvalleysprings.com. Let's see. Going back to kind of some random comments that were earlier in the conversation. Thank you very much for bringing up the existing deficiencies in the road systems, and I think that'd be great to address that with more information in the background report, as Joyce pointed out. There's a lot of roads, I think, that we have existing deficiencies on that we need to put that in there and address that. Public Works does have a list of all the county roads and their levels of service, and I'm not sure how old that is, but there is a list, and it would be helpful to include that list in the background report. even if it is an old list, put the date on and show the levels of service and what the basis for those are, because there's a lot of roads in the county that aren't up to current standards. I know, that they've been here forever, so they're probably grandfathered in, but that should be part of our knowledge base. So thank you for bringing that up, and we look forward to that information in the background report. And then skipping to your comments under the introduction on the bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian. Thank you very much, Mr. Wooster, for removing that aside that kind of singled out people as being incapable of going long distances. There's lots of people with disabilities that are very active people. There's the Special Olympics. We used to watch a guy go almost 2 miles down the Highway 26 in his wheelchair because that was the only way he could get from where he lived to downtown. So there's very active people out there in all ranges of walks of life. So thank you for taking that out. And a question I had on the those plans that are not county approved, that sentence under there, with the exception of the Murphy's plan, none of these plans have been adopted by the county and are all available. So we have a list of plans related to circulation, and the only one evidently that's adopted is the Murphy's circulation pedestrian biking and parking plan. So we have 4 plans underneath that: Calaveras County Pedestrian Master Plan, the Bicycle Master Plan, the Arnold Mobility Plan, and the San Andreas Mobility Plan. From what I'm understanding, then none of those plans have been adopted by the county. So I'm wondering, my question, if these haven't been adopted by the county, how can they be used to address the county's needs? I mean, if they're just out there, but they're not really our official plans, do they really mitigate and address our needs? So that's basically the question. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marty Crane, following up on Colleen's comments, if they haven't been adopted, then why not? And maybe we should be looking at them and seeing, because I know a lot of work has gone into all of these. So maybe we should look at them and use them if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. There was 2 questions out there. One was Mr. Haley's about long-term, that there's a state requirement for long-term circulation transportation planning in community centers. Is that
So the regional transportation agencies, which is CalCog for us, is required to prepare a regional transportation plan. And Amber, help me if I sort of get mixed up with some of the facts, but that is typically a longer term, 35-year time frame, I believe. 20 years also? Okay. Sometimes I know that the state will also look at projections even further on, but as far as the mandates in the state, 20 years is what they look at, and 20 years is sort of a reasonable horizon that we can, sort of try to project what might happen. Obviously, it's always a projection, and it could be something completely different. Had we done this plan in 2004, anticipating the kind of growth that was occurred during that time frame, we would probably have to significantly adjust the plan once the crash occurred in 07 and 08. And so, but you look at trends, you look at what do you think is happening? Probably the price of gas has an effect on transportation, the types of vehicles that are being used. There's so many different variables that if gas suddenly went up to $7 a gallon, you'd see a lot more people taking public transit or not commuting, living somewhere else perhaps, or deciding that they're going to figure out how to telecommute rather than drive to work. So there's all kinds of factors that play into the transportation system. and traffic patterns and impacts to roads. I got a lot sidetracked there. What I think Mr. Haley is referring to is that where we have an area where we've designated for, future development, we need to look beyond just those existing roads and how they may affect transportation and what improvements, but also plan for new roads. If we're going to plan for 20,000 people in an area, where would we need a road system? How would we develop a road system to accommodate that and not just simply rely on the existing handful of major thoroughfares that are there today? And how is that built into our transportation planning? I believe that's what he's getting at. And certainly I would agree with him that we do need to look at that if we have, and as we again look at the land use pattern and the ultimate design that comes out of this plan, that may say that if we just rely on this one road, we're going to need a 4 or 6 lane road. So we're going to need to have a parallel capacity route someplace to relieve that. So maybe that only becomes a 2-lane road with a passing lane in some location, but we have another complete road system to accommodate that new level of development.
Right.
On a basic level, is it Mr. Haley talking about Caltrans requirements, if maybe that's the wrong word, for a circulation element to be longer range, to be looking forward longer than the normal general plan?
Not that I'm aware of, and I know that Kevin Schroeder from Caltrans is sitting in the back corner, and maybe he, although he's relatively new with Caltrans, he might have some information on the planning horizon that Caltrans uses. I know, and I don't recall, I'm sorry, I don't remember the specifics, but working with Caltrans and the Sacramento Area Council of Governments on a longer term transportation planning process, but I'm not sure how that relates to our requirements under the general plan and Caltrans funding projections and long-range planning for roads.
It kind of makes sense to me that if any component of the general plan needs to look longer than 20 years, it would be this one.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that regardless of what the state says we need to do, that this circulation element does look further than 20 years? Are we...
I hate to put a time frame because we really don't know what that is. I mean, we're sort of saying generally we're trying to project 20 years in the future. Beyond that projections are just so wild guesses that they're really sort of useless. But at the same time, these are permanent improvements that will be here long beyond 20 years. And the problems that are created, today, I mean, if we don't look at what the long-term issues might be, decisions we make today can cause problems 20, 30, 40 years down the line. You look at some of the urbanized areas or even the more rapidly growing rural areas where communities are expanding rapidly, and there wasn't the foresight to see this intersection here is going to, at some point in time, have a capacity or have a demand for X number of thousand trips per day, and it was designed such that you can't fix the problem. The way the buildings are, so what you alluded to, if we encroach onto this future right-of-way today by allowing commercial development or new homes to be built within a certain distance to the road, the ability to widen that in the future to accommodate 10, 20, 40 years down the road become very, very difficult, much more expensive, and in some cases just impossible, unless you're willing to condemn a whole row of houses and take them all out. So yes, you do need to look beyond just the planning horizon of this plan, but it becomes challenging just because I don't have a crystal ball that is that clear. I don't think anyone else does either.
Is it the case that when the consultants tried to figure out what roadway expansion would be needed to serve growth, they went through 2035, because that's what the map seems to say.
Right.
Number 3, so we don't have our consultants planning out 35 or 40 years on this issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But also, it's tied to land use. I mean, we're only projecting land use out to 2035. So, and they're basing their projections on the land use of the development potential on the land use map. So, I mean, if you were going to project out circulation to, 2050, I think you'd need to do land use the same. Otherwise, what would they base it on?
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, I have a question for Amber. Does the modeling allow for, future, projection beyond 20-year horizon that we've used?
You'll have to come up, Amber. Thank you.
So, it may be possible that we could look beyond that. It's going to be much more speculative as to what might occur. But I think we can get, because our plan accommodates much more growth than just what's expected. The projections are about another 10,000 people moving to the county over the next 20 years. And we've got, land available for many times that amount. And so we don't know exactly where it's going to go. We don't have just 10,000 people, land available for just 10,000 people. It could all occur in Copperopolis. It could all occur in West Point. We've got some educated guesses of where it's going to go and how it's going to be dispersed. But, there changes happen. You can't anticipate all that far in advance. So we could look at, if the development pattern continues as we expect today, beyond the 20-year horizon, are there other roads that might need to be developed, future widening, that, okay, if we look at 35 years or 40 years in the future, what would that be? I think the modeling allows us to do that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, I mean, the modeling really, you can think of it more as population projection. So, I mean, the year basically doesn't mean anything. It's really, what your population projection is. So it could be 2035, it could be, 3050. I mean, you can really go out to whatever year, you want to go.
So
rather than accommodate what you said, rather than say, if only 10,000 people come here, where are they going to go? And then you plug that into a traffic model and say, what roads are they going to use?
Right.
If we say it's going to be 20,000 or 40,000 people, where are they going to go? And then how would that affect the roads? We could certainly run that kind of modeling.
And that could occur, I mean, you don't know at this point, we're saying it's 2035, 10,000 additional people, but that can occur at 2025, or that could occur at 2050. At this point, you don't really know.
So the traffic patterns are based upon a population growth of how much? Or is that a number?
That's the expected projections that we get from the state, from the Department of Finance, that says about 10,000 people will be moving to the county over the next 20 years. And as Amber said, that's likely to happen based on those projections, but it could accelerate. We could reach that, 10,000 new people in 10 years rather than 20 years. The economy booms, something occurs here that drives population growth, or it could slow down even further. Some other economic crash occurs and,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
we just don't know. But based on normal projections, historical trends, all the things that Department of Finance looks at when they make these projections, and they're updated annually, that's what we're looking at right now based on what we know today.
So I had a different question. Thank you, Amber.
Okay.
When Dave got up and spoke, I didn't get what you guys just talked about out of him. He was referencing community centers specifically for development and bringing roads in all directions to the community centers. Is that what you were saying?
Could I clarify?
Yes, please.
One is the State of California General Plan Design Guidelines is for community general plans, and it recommends a longer-term transportation plan as well as water, sewer. We're not trying to be specific as to any time frame, because I don't know if anybody knows that one. But our problem is it's within a community center, not leading to it, but within a community center, nobody really knows which land area is going to develop at any given time. And if there is a longer-term approach for a major circulation road, example in Copper, it's pretty well obvious that it's Highway 4 to Lake Tulloch and Gopher Ridge to the other side of Auburn's Ferry Road, that's somewhere in there growth will occur. If we had a circulation element to each of those land masses, we could evolve into that, develop it at better cost and better design to keep a country character. And if one of the land masses develop that's not even at the books right now into that concept, later on, closer in development, like in Oak Canyon Ranch, someday it'll come back online, can develop into that, versus not even planning for these other areas, assuming that one project goes forward when it doesn't go forward. So we need a major loop circulation road that identifies how to get to these land masses, and you can only do that in a longer term approach. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean years, but it's got to be a concept that we evolve into. Otherwise, we'll just be doing segments, sections, and redevelopment as we go. Hope that was meaningful.
Well, do you not think, Dave, that C211 kind of addresses that with striving to increase roadway connectivity, particularly in community areas? You don't think that goal is in here already? Are you running it in the introduction? Is that what you were saying?
Well, it's not on the maps, you know,
Okay.
I mean, it's verbiage, but it doesn't provide guidance of how to get to these landmass areas. And if there's not a guidance especially for a circulation road, then it's not in there. It's just like CCWD has a long-term plan at build-out. They go 40 to 50 years, you know, so we can pay into that as we go and not redo it all the time.
I don't think those maps were specifically done. You can't just,
To what extent do the community plans, I mean, I've read, it's been a long time since I've read those draft plans. I don't think they deal with this issue in this kind of detail, but would that be an appropriate place for that kind of?
I think it would be, and I was just thinking that myself, that, you know, as we, you know, one of the next steps we need to take would be to, you know, delve into the community plans. And that certainly would be what, you know, a time to look at more specificity of how do you have internal circulation within the community, and what kind of road system or other circulation system do you need to accommodate that larger area, you know, whether it's, you know, depending on the size, depending on the land usage, depending on the demands for that community, here's the kind of circulation system we will need to accommodate that. This is looking at sort of the broader picture, 40,000 feet of, you know, here's the county-wide what we'll need. We certainly will need to get more into the details. And, you know, as you do, you know, we're referencing, you know, Oak Canyon Ranch project, you know, that's part of the specific planning process, is that, you know, it's a component of the general plan, so you have to look at each of these elements and say, well, how does this large project fit into the plan, and how are we going to accommodate the roads, the sewer, the water, you know, schools, everything else, all the public infrastructure and public services necessary to accommodate that new development. So I think that we'll get there, and it's you know, based on the draft land use map that was prepared last December, or was released last December. These maps here reflect the need and demand for road improvements based on that. As that map evolves, as we look into it and make changes, and the board makes further changes, these maps will be revised to address that. And one of the things that we can look at is if some community ends up being, that's going to require a 4-lane road there. Do we want a 4-lane road? Maybe we need a second 2-lane road to accommodate that same level of traffic. And I think that's, again, what Dave is trying to get at as far as Copperopolis is concerned, is we don't want to necessarily funnel all the traffic onto O'Byrne's Ferry Road. Let's look at some alternative routes so that when these other developments come in, we're funding those improvements from the very beginning and not waiting until sort of after the fact or, when that new development's, oh, gee, we're going to need a new road here now. But we sort of said, if we're going to allow 30,000 people to live in this community, we're going to need this level of road interconnectedness and capacity.
Or require it to be a 4-lane highway, and that disrupts the character of the community.
Right. So that's so then gets, comes in the policy questions. Yeah, we can accommodate traffic with a 4 or 6-lane highway. Is that what we want in this community, or do we want 4 or 6 2-lane roads to provide that more rural feel?
Well, to what extent, and I don't think every community plan would necessarily need a lot of detail about circulation, but for copper, it makes a lot
I
of
think
sense.
the areas where we have the most growth pressure, which is obviously the Valley Springs, La Contenta area, and Copperopolis, we'll need to look at that much more closely.
So, so the people that, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a Copperopolis community plan. Did they get together?
There is one that's in the works.
Okay.
It's not finished yet, and one of the questions that, when we met last June, Copperopolis was not identified as one of those that we would definitely include in the general plan at this stage because of the amount of work that's probably still necessary in it. I would want it to be one of the top priorities of, once we get the rest of the general plan adopted, we pick that back up and keep working on it. We can only do so much, at this time, and we really do need to get the full plan adopted. Valley Springs is another one of those. It's got a lot of contention. I think because those two areas face the most amount of growth pressure because they're closest to the west end of the county and closest to commute ability to the larger urban areas of the valley. Those are going to be the more contentious areas in which we have to resolve some planning issues.
We left placeholders for those to
Yes.
be worked on, updated, and come into the
They
general
definitely
plan.
would be
Yeah.
incorporated into the plan, and they would be a high priority for me. It's my recommendation to the board to, that's where we allocate our resources on, is finish those up.
Yeah.
Okay, now, but with respect to Valley Springs, Copperopolis, and they're kind of in the same boat, what kind of resources can be brought to bear with respect to transportation issues, circulation issues, that can be plugged into those community plans? Where the county has the ability to hire consultants to draw up these maps, what about the community plan people?
Well, that will be a county plan as well. That will be working closely with the communities. The county staff and any consultants we need would have the same level of resources that we have for this. And again, it's just a matter of allocating those resources at the board levels. How much can we afford to spend on the planning department? And here are the here's my $900,000 budget for the year, and these are the tasks I intend to accomplish, and these are the most important ones. And so once we're done with the general plan, we can shift those resources to the next set of priorities.
Then, knowing that when it comes to Copperopolis and Valley Springs, at least, that those community plans are going to be heavy on circulation element where other community plans will not be.
Probably, most likely, it makes sense.
Okay, should we be referencing that in this circulation element, that in effect, we will be recognizing that those particular some particular community plans will add substantial information with respect to circulation as needed for those particular communities? Roughly put, but you understand?
Yeah. I suppose, it's...
Well, there's going to have to be some linkages, too.
Yeah. It all has to be internally consistent, and if the community plans are part of our general plan, they all have to, to be consistent. So I don't think it's necessary to add that statement or something to that effect in there. It doesn't hurt to have, it's...
No, I understand.
Well, it could fit in with what the roadway system goal, and then you could have a policy. I don't know.
It would be saying as you read this circulation element, understand, this is not all of it. Because the completion of that is with some communities, is heavily dependent upon the community plans themselves.
Right, well, there could be implications for other elements and the linkage there too. So once you start here, you're going to have to, like, every time that there's a higher level of detail in a community plan, you'll have to reference it back here. Or it's just known, in the introduction, if you're reading this and you're interested in these communities, understand that there are other guidelines and policies that may be more specific to those communities and just say it in a blanket kind of way.
Almost like a footnote, see Copperopolis Community Plan for further details.
I think as we get into the community plan, some of the issues, and maybe the place to put that kind of statement is in the introduction chapter. We've already gone through that, but maybe there needs to be a section that describes the community plans and how they fit in.
If you're interested here, you need to go back and look, because
Yeah.
there's other information, which, guidelines, policies, implementation measures that reflect back specifically to each of those communities. So in other words, alerting the reader, so you don't have to keep saying it over and over every time there is one, whether it's in copper or here or there, but just a blanket statement that for these communities, and these community plans are in this, general plan, and that you need to be aware and make sure you review those plans.
And that would be plugged in where? Peter,
In the
you just
introduction.
mentioned-
I think the introduction chapter.
Of the
whole
general
plan.
plan.
Of the general plan.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's going to be, as you said, there's some communities that are going to be focused on something else other
Right.
than transportation.
That's where it
not the
should
big-
be.
big
Could be
issue.
design review,
Completely.
could be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Could
that
happen.
would be a good place to have that.
I
So,
agree.
when we finish our, to a line-by-line review, the whole package will sort of come back and make sure that everything's interconnected. So we'll do have sort of one last chance. So this is our final product we're going to send to the board. I'll make sure that gets included in the introduction, and you'll see those final changes. I think that's a great idea, Fawn.
The only other note that I have coming from public comments is from page C10, the last paragraph of bicycles, et cetera. And I think it came from Colleen. It has to do with the paragraph on equestrian travel. The paragraph has to do with equestrian travel, trails and the like, but the bullet points aren't necessarily equestrian travel plans, are they?
No, it probably should be a paragraph break there on that last,
Where it's a new start with plans related to.
yeah.
Every kind of non-motorized.
And actually, it was Colleen and Marty, and the question was, can they be used to address the county's needs? And I don't think in here it says that they will be used to address
Maybe
the
it was
county.
Marty, not Colleen.
Well, they both did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think in here it does say that these plans will be used to address the county's non-motorized needs. It's just a listing of existing documents that address those.
Say that again, Vaughn. I'm not sure I heard you well.
The comment, I believe, that Marty and Colleen had asked was that if we have this list of plans in here, they're not adopted, so if they're not adopted, how can they address the county's needs? And my comment is, I don't think it's saying that addresses the county's needs, it's just saying that these documents exist and they're out there. It's just sort of a listing.
Yeah, right. It isn't that specific. It's
Well,
just-
it doesn't call for the county to do anything. Ultimately, I'm sure there's a lot of people that wish that they were adopted and they were in place, but the fact is that they're not. But this just acknowledges their existence.
Right, it's background information that we
Right.
used, and we looked at that, and it's information that as we continue, circulation planning, those are
help
resources.
inform
They may be, I know that there's a bike ped master plan that's in the works, it's being updated right now, that COG is working on, that they intend to, bring to the county. So these are all ongoing. This is sort of a snapshot today of what plans are out there that we've looked at and considered in looking, that provide more detail and could be adopted. For whatever reason, in '07 and '09, they weren't adopted by the county. Either the county chose not to, or they just never took that next step to get them up to the board.
How did they come to be? What
I think
committees
some of them
formed?
were Caltrans money.
Some of them were
and
grant money
yeah.
that the COG pursued. Some of them were probably community initiated programs. You know, the Murphy Circulation Plan, you know, again, this was now 14 years ago. I don't know how that occurred. I'm sure there's probably people in the audience that were directly involved in those plans and probably could have more information. But I know, for example, the San Andreas Mobility Plan was something that, while the county assisted in the preparation, we weren't the lead on it. And when it got to the point in time of adoption, there was some hesitation on the county's part. But it's there, it's good information, it could be used for future, you know, design criteria or planning, you know, as we
Okay.
look at
To the
these
extent that
areas.
these plans, and some of them are pretty old now, but maybe they have something to offer the a person looking
Certainly.
for information in the future, and do they get attached to the background report?
Not necessarily an attachment, they're referenced, they're available. You know, if we don't need to attach every single document that was ever prepared, we'd have, our general plan would be, you know, a bookshelf. But the fact that they're there in existence doesn't diminish them in any way. The fact that they're not incorporated in the general plan, but they're
I'm done with it.
noted.
Okay, so going back to Colleen's point, I mean, we have it highlighted on the Murphy's one that was done in 2002. And that one is the only one adopted. I think maybe in a parenthesis somewhere we should put was adopted by the county and the others were not, just so that we have a clean reference that, because I know it's not saying that they are, but one of them is specifically adopted and the other four are not. And I think there needs to be an asterisk noting that.
Well, it does say that, Lisa.
Where? I just
In
went
the
back
last
over it
paragraph at the
twice.
bottom of C9.
C9.
With the exception of the
Second
Murphy's
sentence.
plans.
Second
Murphy's plan.
sentence, last paragraph.
With the
Right.
exception of the Murphy's plan.
None of these has been adopted by the county.
Okay, I'm being.
Oh, it's right here. With the exception of the Murphy's plan, yada, yada, none of these have been adopted, so that's referencing this one.
And all, and we changed the language, and all are available, okay. We just went over all that. Need a break,
It's a
need more
line.
coffee.
No, but what you could do is in the parentheses that you could have, you could just say adopted February
I think it
2002.
I think it should have.
Yeah, I mean, you could have it there. Can't we just say
Why
what the
not?
adoption date is?
Why not?
Yeah.
That distinguishes it from the other one
Right,
with dates.
right. That this is a, you know, sort of a legal document now at the county now. So just put the adoption date, adopted by BOS.
I mean, let's face it, if Lisa missed it, lots of people could miss it.
Oh,
Okay, you can
I'm
do that.
asleep this morning.
All right.
Had a long night.
We've,
Just for a little clarification of what I brought up earlier, you're talking about
1 minute there.
less than that.
Okay.
Can we just, since we're talking about this, can we just say, okay, all community work that's been done, I mean, we're talking hours and passion, and people have one life of their own, and they set aside a whole bunch of that to work on these documents. Can we just say that we're going to respect that, and we're going to look into those and maybe update them or incorporate what we can into them, at least honor the work that was done?
These aren't community plans, these are just the mobility plans.
Right.
And I think we've identified the ones that exist out there. and
But when we
and-
say, yeah, but when we say this has been adopted by the county, that's saying that had value. We went through the process. We put a priority on that. But the others that haven't been, we don't know why they weren't. This was former boards and maybe they just didn't care, or maybe it wasn't a priority. Maybe they had other things on their plate or something. But for one reason or another, they were not adopted. Maybe they just weren't put forward. There's a lot of different reasons why they weren't. And I'd just like us to give some respect to the work.
I
that
think
was
they've been given a lot of respect. They're in the general plan and they're not adopted, so we're acknowledging them. That's my take on this.
Thank you.
If we weren't
Okay.
acknowledging them, then I would be concerned.
Thank you. All right, are we ready for a break?
Yes.
Okay, so we will adjourn at 11 sharp? Is that good? I
Are
mean,
you looking at the
recess.
same clock?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want 20 minutes? Do you want 5 minutes?
How about
Let's
we
just do a 10-minute
reconvene?
break.
Yeah.
All right, so, all right, 10
About
till. You guys are always complaining it's too
No.
short.
No, we don't want to be here.
We don't have a net.
Oh, we don't have a net.
Make it 20 minutes.
Allocate them. What do you?
Yes, but now we're waiting for a net.
Dang right.
I agree.
She's more.
So you can sit and talk for a minute. What's that? Well, we're waiting for a net. A net.
Updated periodically? Or,
We have a net.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking like these plans help inform the county's need for non-motorized circulation or something.
yeah. Well, let's bring it back.
Yeah, because I agree. I mean, it's like, it helps inform to address the needs of the, okay. Now I got a big old candy in my, all right, so we're back in, from our recess, and during recess, we had a comment that still on page 10, where there was a discussion about the existing non-motorized circulation plans that are in existence. There was a sentence at the bottom, it says, "These plans must be updated periodically to address the current needs of the county, its citizens, and their circulation needs." Which is a little bit awkward because, I mean, they should be updated, but at this point, with the exception of the Murphys, those plans are not have not been adopted by the county. So maybe there's some wordsmithing that needs to happen with that last sentence.
Maybe my suggestion would be we strike these plans and just say plans should be updated. And that references, whatever future plans. We might decide to have a Calavera or a Copperopolis mobility plan. It's not included this. I doubt at this point in time we'd go back and just adopt these plans. We might pick them up and adopt a revised version of them.
I like
So I
that
think
word.
just generally that any planning should be revised periodically and looked at.
I like that.
I'm good with that, too. I think
Okay.
that, yeah.
Well, but should there be language to the effect that to be adopted? I mean, allow some, a language that allows for a plan to be adopted at some point, or to be considered for adoption at some point?
I don't think that the fact that, well, certainly if the county adopts a plan, and the plan has policy statements and implementation measures.
And
that's
funding.
saying, that's saying, this is what the county is going to do. The fact that the county hasn't adopted that plan doesn't mean that it doesn't have value to it.
I agree
And
with
so,
that.
so whether or not the county adopts it, and clearly if the county adopts it, it's fully on board and intends to implement it. I guess I'm hesitant to say that we are definitely going to adopt some plans, because I don't know what it is. Now, if they're in the implementation measures, we say we're going to adopt a pedestrian circulation, a pedestrian
think
bicycle
there is
plan, which I
something
think
like
there is
that in
something like that. That's what we're going to do moving forward. I think we were, sort of looking back at these older plans, and these are here for reference, and we could certainly pull from those plans, for new future planning efforts. I don't think discussing whether those should be adopted, if we want to adopt a new plan, they should be in the policy documents and the implementation program. If we say we want to adopt certain mobility plans or whatever they may be, then that's where they should be rather than in the general discussion.
All right, we good with that revision? All right, moving on to goals and policies. So we're on goal C1. Any comments? And how about the policies?
I had, the description of complete streets concepts was provided in the earlier discussion is inappropriate in the policy.
So these notes in italics are just my notes to explain why I made some of the edits that I did.
Okay.
So that policy above there, I struck out that.
You didn't need it all.
I didn't think it was necessary to have it in the policy itself. The description of complete streets is elsewhere.
Okay.
Well, it will be elsewhere.
Well, it was on page 9, and I think we're going to move it to page 1 and
Right.
modify it somewhat.
And identify it as being the complete streets policy, which it does not do now.
Right.
Okay, I do have some issues with policy C1.1.
Okay.
I'm assuming, reading this, that it is not limited to areas within communities. That would be correct?
What was the question?
C 1.1 is not limited to roads and sidewalks and so forth within communities.
That's correct.
And that's probably because the statute doesn't so limit it.
Right, right.
Okay.
But I think that, in the last phrase there, as appropriate for surrounding land uses, you wouldn't necessarily need to have, sidewalks in agricultural land. So we need to look, as we make these more refined planning documents, say, well, where are sidewalks appropriate? Where do we need to have sidewalks? Where do we need to have bike lanes? Where do we need to have, other circulation needs? How is that going to accommodate the specifics of that community, whether it's small, concise planning area or broader region?
Okay, I am having some difficulty understanding how we incorporate this concept of complete streets in all operations and maintenance activities. How does one do that?
Well, operations could be snow removal activities. How do you make sure that people can still walk when there's, ice and snow on the ground? So we need to maintain and operate the roads so that, the sidewalks are cleared, or that, we don't pile up the snow so that only cars can get by, but someone who doesn't have a car can still get to where she needs to be. Maintenance, operations and maintenance would also include, roadside clearance, keeping vegetation down, so not only for sight distance, visibility for vehicles and drivers, but also for, people walking along the side of the road. It's going to be an area where we expect to have, a higher pedestrian traffic volume. You need to make sure that the roads are maintained and operated safely for them as well.
Okay. It also says we're going to incorporate the concept of complete streets in all planning, programming, design, operations, and maintenance activities as appropriate for surrounding land uses. Given the steep topography that we have in this county, the narrow roads that we have, winding roads, it's hard for me to see how we can do that in every planning, programming, and design activity that we do. And that seems to be the goal here. It doesn't seem to incorporate the concept that, we're not the flat valley. We're limited by the physical character of the county.
Well, maybe at the end of that, we could also add appropriate for surrounding land uses, topographical and other constraints, or something like that.
Say that again?
Topographical and other constraints.
Or just appropriate for the terrain.
Consistent with, or?
Appropriate for the terrain and surrounding land uses.
Yeah.
Let me try this one out on you. Can we say incorporate the concepts of complete streets into new transportation development projects where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography?
I think that may be too limiting.
Because it leaves out
It's just
operations
new.
and maintenance.
Right.
Because I think we also need to look at, well, how might we rehabilitate older roads? We're looking at, existing communities with substandard roads, and part of our circulation planning would be, what do we need to do to upgrade those roads to accommodate school kids walking to school? There's no sidewalks.
Nevertheless, the where feasible aspect of it and the consideration of the limitations of the topography, I think are points well taken.
Yeah, and
I like that part. I'm supportive of the terrain or topography.
Definitely.
I
But
think we
I'm-
should strike the word new from what I read, because that's a
And then
good
you've
point.
got-
If you're going to redo a road or repair a road, and the opportunity presents itself, sure, you would take advantage of it. So it would be any transportation and development project, not just new ones, where it's feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography.
So why not just incorporate the concept of complete streets in planning, programming, design, operations, and maintenance activities, blah, 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 with the terrain and the topography?
Could I have a reread from Mr. Wooster minus the new development component?
Incorporate the concept of complete streets into transportation and development projects where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography.
You're in thought mode, Peter.
yeah, I'm just trying to think how that. Read it one more time for me.
Incorporate the concept of complete streets into transportation and development projects where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography.
Transportation and development projects to include operations and maintenance.
That would be fine.
Correct.
I
Well,
think it
I mean,
does.
I'm saying it's in there by definition, but if you don't think so, then it would be added.
I think it's in there too, and it also seems to me that it would be sort of silly to do maintenance activities that don't preserve everything that's already there as usable. I mean, why would you do that?
Right.
I like the retaining the, even though it may be redundant, the operations and maintenance aspect. So if we kept that, so if your suggestion about including, what would the...
To include
Yes.
operations and maintenance.
So how would it read now with that?
Incorporate the concept of complete streets into transportation and development projects to include operations and maintenance activities where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography.
Peter?
It's your policy call. I'm just trying to think what that would, and is it too limiting by saying transportation development projects? When I think of a transportation project, I think of a specific road, building, we're going to widen this road. Or development projects, as we're reviewing this subdivision or this commercial use.
Drop the word development.
And is there a broader perspective in sort of the planning and programming and design work that we, what about adopting a new design guidelines for roads, for example? And it doesn't say that every street has to have a bike lane and a sidewalk. It just says we need to incorporate the concept of this. I think the suitability and feasibility is obviously that's something we have to consider regardless. We're not going to put a sidewalk on Highway 12 through Glencoe. But there are maybe areas where, despite the topography, you need to get pedestrians from this higher density residential area to the school nearby. And it may mean you have to build a sidewalk along there. It's going to be more expensive because it's a steep piece of property. But as long as we are planning for intensive use of land nearby where people are going to want to walk, we should incorporate that design. It may mean that you have to expend a lot more money to build that road.
And I don't think the statement as drafted, as suggested, precludes that. It just indicates that in the balancing act that you have to go through, you consider the feasibility.
Right.
Against the benefits, just like we always do. But it does suggest that with this language, it does suggest that there's going to be times when you just can't do that.
Right, no, I understand that, and I think that, the original language anticipated that. I think that what you're saying is you're trying to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
My only concern really is just, are we too limiting in saying transportation development projects?
And I think that's a good point. I think it is limiting versus looking at other kinds of activities that could trigger, or visiting of this complete street concepts.
What would those be?
Like Peter said, design review guidelines. That could be
For what, though?
for design review guidelines, looking at, development near a new house near in a historic district.
So if we were
It's covered
to,
by development, covered by the word. If it's not the transportation or development, what is it that you're concerned about?
It's let's say that there isn't a specific development, but there is a proposed revision of the guidelines themselves that may impact the, looking at, that could trigger something of a bigger nature, that it's not a development project and it's not a transportation project, but it is guidelines that would guide development in that specific district. Does that make sense?
No.
so we have a design manual
I
that
think
says,
it's-
here's the type
I
of
think it's
roads that you have
included
to
there.
build if you are putting in a subdivision. And, they're basically right now designed to accommodate vehicular traffic. If you've got X number of vehicle trips and it's this type of road, you need to build it this wide. It has, this type of material. Should we consider, if we're going to update that design manual, we would want to look at, well, how does the complete streets concept sort of fit in here? In which areas of the county would we have, if there's a certain threshold that meets the need for pedestrian, here's the sidewalk design we have, or here's the, bike lane design that we have. That's the kind of thing that would be under the sort of the planning and programming aspect of the original policy.
Suppose we added the phrase after projects and guidelines.
I took development projects as to be all encompassing.
I did too, but
Design, all of the guidelines, et cetera. I mean, it's more of an all-encompassing term or phrase, in my opinion. You don't have to have all the individual pieces, they're all in there. What
Well, to me,
development project doesn't have design and all of these other guidelines and whatnot?
I guess when I hear the term development project, I think
Think
of
of
a
a
specific
specific, yeah.
application for development. Someone's subdivision application, someone's specific plan. And, it doesn't mean it won't work. It's just that I think the interpretation of that phrase could vary. But what's going to happen over the years is people are going to read this and say, well, this doesn't mean that, this means something else.
But then it means it's just a transportation project.
Yeah.
how about if we change the word into to for? So it would read, incorporate the concept of complete streets for transportation and development projects, et
Like
cetera.
potentially could this be another example? If we're looking like a dark skies ordinance? I mean, and we're looking at that and then how, incorporating sort of light, if there's a bicycle path or, that could be a planning.
Pedestrian safety.
Pedestrian,
yeah.
Could trigger, doing that ordinance, we could trigger, looking back at complete streets and say, well, all right, well, we're down shielding and, but what if we have these pedestrian pathways? I'm just trying to think of another example and planning that's not a specific development project and it isn't specific guidelines, but that could trigger the need for some other language other than just development project. That is more, I think, what Peter was getting at originally was the planning concept stage.
Well, planning for what? Planning transportation?
I guess that's where we're hung up, is we don't understand, because we're looking at this as planning for transportation and development, and what could fall outside of that activity.
It's in this element, so it's transportation.
Well, a lot of it also could be, grant funding applications. So if we're just looking at road improvement and we don't incorporate, well, how are pedestrians going to be accommodated? How are, these are also characteristics of the planning aspect that if we're just looking at, we want to widen a certain road, and do we look at that in just the vehicle capacity of that road, or do we look at the other needs? It may be it's a road that we don't need to have, it's not a pedestrian, oriented road. It's not some place where people are going to walk, so we don't need to worry about it. I don't think, again, it doesn't mean that every single road in the county has to have all of these features in it. It's just that as we look at any aspect of our transportation planning, we should be looking at these things to make sure that we can accommodate where it's feasible, where it's practical, where it makes sense, the full range of transportation options, not just getting in a car and driving.
Well, I think this does that. I do think we should change the word into to for, because I think the word into is what's got people hung up as being, looking at specific projects. If you substitute the word for, it is broader.
How about incorporate the concept of complete streets for transportation, planning, and development projects? And then the rest is as you go. I think that if we have the planning in there, that helps.
I would just put planning before transportation. It seemed
I
to,
think that's what Peter just did, didn't you?
We'll add transportation planning, but for planning transportation and development projects.
that would flow pretty well.
I guess maybe the word I'm getting hung up on is projects as opposed to broader, because when I think of a project, I think of a
So you
specific
could just get
development
rid of
project. That's why
projects like
that's
you
where I'm getting hung
suggest.
up.
You suggested, right? Get rid of projects?
For planning, transportation, and development,
Now that I
where
know what
feasible.
Peter's hang-up is,
Yeah.
by including the word planning there, it gives you, it addresses the issue that if you're just doing planning, you want to consider complete
Right.
streets component, even if you're not talking about a specific
Right.
development.
Mhm.
Fine. But then the tail end of
The feasible and
Kelly's,
the topography, yes.
feasibility,
Right.
et cetera.
So if we
So it would
reference,
read this way, let me try it. Incorporate the concept of complete streets for planning, transportation, and development projects, where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography,
except no projects,
but no projects.
no projects.
And I don't think I would have didn't,
Okay.
no comma after planning. For planning, transportation, and development, where feasible and suitable.
I think it means the same thing to me, but
Yeah.
fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Now I'm hung up. Okay, isn't that too narrow? It goes beyond planning. It includes what you're actually going to do.
Well, especially if you read the
That's true.
implementations that are attached to that.
So why not just say for planning, transportation, and development, to make sure you're
Okay.
covered all three?
Yeah.
I
Okay,
agree,
all right.
And we're leaving out the word projects
Right.
as being too limiting.
right.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Are we leaving in operations and maintenance? Are we,
Yes, to include, I forgot that, to include operations and maintenance activities. So shall I try it one more
Yeah,
time?
let's give it another stab there, Kelly.
Okay. Incorporate the concept of complete streets for planning, transportation, and development, to include operations and maintenance activities, comma, where feasible and suitable to the rural nature of the county and its topography.
Okay,
Okay?
we're good?
Okay.
All right,
There's one.
there's one. So next, who's got comments on,
I have a 1.2 small one.
okay,
I'd like to see, where it says feasible, I'd like to use the word practical. Lots of things are feasible, but not necessarily practical.
Is it practical or practicable?
Practicable.
I'd look up the difference. It would be practicable.
Okay?
I'm okay with that. I would also suggest at the end where it speaks of, and it allows to the extent now practicable, preservation of existing historical resources. I think we should consider adding the phrase, "and productive resources." I have in mind people who plan these road projects routinely take out other people's corrals, barns, and things like that.
what's that? I'm sorry, I didn't get the
What do they
example.
do?
Yeah?
They go right through your corrals.
Who?
The people who are planning new roads,
People, us, the county planning
Yeah.
new roads?
yeah.
I'm sorry, still not getting it.
Oh, no, he's right.
Well, no, I'm not
When-
saying
when
he's
the
wrong, I just don't understand.
When the county decides, when the county decides it's going to improve a road by changing the alignment, sometimes they just go out of their way to knock out people's houses and corrals. They do, okay? All I'm saying is that may not be a historical resource, but it's valuable to somebody, and the word productive would probably cover it. If it's not practicable, then you got to go through it.
I'm fine with it. Your call. I think that the reality is, any agency that's trying to acquire right-of-way is going to minimize there's a balance between the most effective engineering design, which is a straight line on a flat surface, and which we don't have here too much, and avoiding costs. So, if you're going to have to swing around someone's house, so you don't have to take the house and pay for you still have to pay for the loss of the land, but not the loss of the house as well. It's probably the way it's going to be designed. But there's some cases where, you're going to design a road for a 65 mile an hour design speed, then it has to meet certain curve ratios and, vertical curve alignments and that kind of stuff. But where you can avoid, someone's improvements. I think the county certainly tries to do that because we don't want to pay for taking away someone's house. But that's not always the case. Having the word productive in there is not a problem, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay?
So it would say existing historical or productive resources?
And/or productive
Okay.
would be good.
Okay, next.
On 1.3, I'd just like to have an example of what a construction project is that reduces vehicle miles traveled.
Trying to think of a good, what one would be. It may be that, we have options of which roads we want to improve. And is it going to be a road that is going to encourage more people to commute to the valley? Or is it going to be one that might provide an opportunity for shorter trips, making it more convenient for people to get from, point A to point B, closer? I think maybe, trying to think of an example of one that in a community, you might have a congested stretch of road, intersection, that is more used by local traffic rather than through traffic. And so that might be more of a priority, is to put our funding resources towards those fixes that has more localized needs rather than longer trip traffic generation kind of projects. It's difficult because most of the funding that we get is looking at regional transportation. And maybe it gets even more towards if there's a roadway that makes a connection that doesn't exist today, that might allow someone to walk or ride a bike or take a very short trip to get, rather than have to go all the way around something, you might make a short connection somewhere that reduces the amount of travel time and distance.
Well, the reason I question that is, it seems like with the topography of the county, all of the practical routes to get from point A to point B are there. And there aren't any shortcuts.
They were designed when wagons were the
Right.
mode of transportation, yeah.
But, there's canyons and whatnot. So a project that reduces vehicle miles traveled is a shortcut in my view.
Yeah.
And how do you create shortcuts?
I think that this is, it's difficult in a county like ours to sort of meet the new mandates of the state and the requirement under CEQA now to look at VMT rather than LOS as the threshold for significance of traffic impacts. So I guess the focus of this policy would be to fund road improvements that enhance internal circulation within a community as opposed to external, inter-community transportation.
But, yeah, fine. I don't see those as reducing vehicle miles traveled. Going back to the element that we had, where we talked about the greenhouse gases. Okay, now, you can certainly improve a road.
This is linked,
And you can
definitely linked.
smooth things out, and you can make traffic flow without stopping, perhaps, like at the intersection of 12 and 26. And that presumably has an effect on greenhouse gases. You get smoother traffic, not stop and go, traffic jams and whatnot that cause greenhouse gases. But in terms of actually reducing the vehicle miles traveled, not a bit. It's the same number of miles, it's just, it's faster, it's smoother, it's safer, and has those other advantages, greenhouse gases, if you will. But that's why it has, in terms of miles traveled, that's a goal that I just don't know that it's practical to state.
But couldn't it also be prioritized funding, because this has to do with all kinds of, since this is in the general policy section about, it would be enhanced bus service that would reduce vehicle miles traveled. It could be bicycle paths to employment centers. It could be a safe route to school, so parents don't have to drive their children to school because now they have a safe route. Those would all be projects with a reduction in vehicle miles traveled.
So projects that favor transportation modes other than vehicles.
Or
About the only way you can
a
reduce the
more
vehicle
efficient
miles.
route, but I'm just saying, it's not just a shortcut. There are other ways to reduce vehicle miles
Okay,
traveled.
I was thinking
Yeah.
of vehicles on the road, how do you reduce the vehicles? And you're saying the goal here is to take the vehicle off the road in as many cases as possible.
Right, right.
Right? That's an example. That's what I wanted. all I have on that section.
I just wanted to bring up 1.5. It was in Joyce Heppel's comments about, she listed it a couple of times. One was, she was asking for a more detailed discussion of what long-term funding capabilities will be and discuss the effect this funding will have on meeting county road funding needs. And then she brought up the TOT again. In her other comments on this same 1.5, she was looking at how do we, basically, how do we prioritize transportation funds? How do we share funding for transportation with state and federal? Should we have a greater role in funding, and do we have a funding strategy? And then she provided some policy examples from 2 other counties, Nevada, and I think it was Nevada, and Mariposa. I don't know if you had a chance to review.
I did. I wasn't really sure how that would be addressed. I mean, certainly it's something we could consider adding some additional policy language as far as, or in the implementation program. I noticed that we don't have a specific implementation measure for this policy. You know, I think it's sort of self-implementing. We're going to pursue whatever resources are out there. I think the concern that's been expressed by Joyce and certainly a lot of others through the review of this is, you know, we haven't kept pace with the funding. How are we going to do that? And you know, it's a practice of the county essentially that, you know, we need to keep up to date with our impact fees. You know, for whatever reason, it hasn't been done. You know, the benefit basin fees were adopted, and you know, we haven't looked at them since they were adopted. So I think.
So we haven't collected any money in them?
Well, we're still collecting money, but are we collecting? Or we want to make sure we're collecting enough to mitigate the cost. As the cost of construction increases, are we collecting enough money to pay for those improvements, or are we going to be short? You know, and it's always a problem we have with impact fees is the impact is going to be there. We will never have the full amount of money up front to pay for the improvements. We have to fund it somewhere else first and maybe reimburse ourselves as development occurs. Unless we wait for the very last house to be built, and then we have the money to build the roads to serve that. So there's a lag time between the impact on the roads and the improvements to support it, if it's funded solely through impact fees. Because you can't collect the impact fee until the house is built. We can't collect it up front. We can sometimes require that the developer build the road, and particularly if it's necessary for that specific project, and then if it serves more than just his or her project, they can get reimbursed through the collection of impact fees as other projects come online that are also using that road. So the broader scope of improvements funded through impact fees is there's going to be an impact before the money is there to make the improvements. And usually it's a several-year lag time.
1.5, is it 1.5? You're talking about seeking, this is like supplemental income, right, that you're looking for.
Right. So there's all kinds of funding through the state and federal transportation agencies. And they're competitive grants, and we usually work with COG to write grant applications to fund certain road improvements. And there's all kinds of priorities the state and federal government has as far as where they're going to send the resources. An example would be the Highway 4 improvements. I just learned yesterday that we were awarded, $10.3 million to do a part of the wagon trail project.
10.2?
10.3 million, I believe it was. And this was, COG was awarded that, and that money goes into the wagon trail project that we've been working on. I don't know what the full cost of that, but it's, that's a very short stretch of the road that will be, hopefully, that money will go towards building that. There were $1 billion worth of applications statewide for $100 million of total money that was allocated throughout the state, and we got a tenth of that. That's really good for us. Lost my train of thought. So what this policy is saying is, as a policy of the county, we're going to look everywhere we can for those state and federal dollars, and as long as it makes sense. I mean, there's sometimes in one of the issues about grant funding that people have, well, there's strings attached. Yeah, there's strings attached, and then people want to give you your money. And doesn't mean that, we'll accept everything, but where it makes sense for the county, we want to actively pursue those kind of grant funds, because otherwise we're not going to get any. And it will go to Tuolumne County or the Valley or the Bay Area or somewhere else. And so it's a very competitive market for federal and state transportation grants. We've been relatively successful in the past, and we want to continue that approach. Because let's make our play for those funds and save the county taxpayers where we can. So that's basically what this is saying. I think that there is questions that Joyce brought up, gets more into the implementation, into how are we going to ensure that, I think there's some other policy, I know there are other policies about ensuring that development pays their fair share of the costs. And that is through the RIM fee, through benefit basin fees, and the implementation would be we maintain the RIM fee, we update it regularly, we look at other places that we might need a benefit basin if there's specialized road improvements that serve.
You're talking about other policies now.
Other policies, yeah. I don't think
Yeah, that's what he
that
said.
issue that Fawn was talking about really addresses this policy. I think it addresses, but the concern is that the financial resources to fund the road improvements isn't keeping pace with development. That's the broad umbrella concern, and it was expressed back in the last lawsuits with the county on the old general plan, and how we needed to show that it's not just lip service to say that the roads will keep pace with the development. We have to actually have a program in place to show how it's going to keep pace, and that was why we adopted the RIM fee program. Now the concern is, does the RIM fee actually and adequately fund the improvements that are necessary? And that needs to be something that Public Works needs to look at and review the funding and review the costs. And it gets back to those maps. It says, if we're going to allow this development, here are the road improvements we need to make. How much is that going to cost us? If it's going to cost us this much money, how do we divvy that up between the 10,000 people that are coming? And how much do they have to pay? So it's a complicated exercise in mathematics and projections and engineering to come up with that fee.
RIM fees were adopted when?
90-something, 98? I don't
It was
remember.
that late.
I
I think
don't
it was
know.
earlier than that, like maybe 96.
Okay.
Okay.
At
Ninety-
least
Sometime in the
I think it
90s.
was-
Yeah.
Prior to that, where'd the money come from? The roads.
Probably the general fund.
Sources, just same
Tax
sort,
dollars for your properties.
Yeah.
Right, but has the state pays us back gas tax money, right?
We get money from gas tax, yes.
Okay. Has the state reduced that amount because we now have RIM fees? So it's a net sum,
Not-
sum.
No, it's
Not because of the RIM fee. It may have been reduced because of the budget issues at the state. There are many reasons why, the state decides when and how it's going to pay the counties. But not because we're helping ourselves.
Here's the mystery to me. Before RIM fees, we had roads, okay? Now, maybe adequate or inadequate, we can argue that. Now we've got RIM fees, so we have money there depending on how much development's going on. And now we're still looking for more money because RIM fees aren't enough. There's a progression. I see a trend happening here. There's never enough money for the roads, but we keep adding more money for them, but there's never enough. And yet, some of these funding sources didn't even exist until recently, and
Well, other sources have been reduced. pre-Prop 13, the county said, we need more money, we'll just increase the property tax, and that's how they did it. And then Prop 13 came around and says, okay, we can't, dip at that well anymore. And so that's when fees started becoming more widely used. You had to directly correlate the money that we're, collecting from people to the impact that they had. And we can't collect more money than the actual impact is. And so you have to do that complicated analysis, say, okay, your fair share of this. There's always been state money available for roads, but those are probably diminished over time as the state coffers have shrunk in comparison to what they were before. So it's a constantly, I'm sure, 40 years ago, they were wondering how they were going to pave that road. There's still the question of, do we have enough money to do that?
Okay. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a discussion of the, I believe it's the sales tax rebate from the state. And it had to do, I believe, with, we don't have enough money. It was a budget hearing. Mm-hmm. And it's then that I learned that the state refunds sales tax dollars to counties, but different amounts, different percentages. And our percentage, the percentage for Calaveras County, was far less than our neighboring 2 counties. And yet,
because it's based on the sales, where the sales are generated. And there's been, 20 years ago, I remember hearing a proposal that it should be based on population, that the distribution of sales tax revenue should go to where the people live, not to where they buy their groceries or buy their goods. Everyone in this county shops somewhere else. We don't have any major, big box stores where huge, large sales tax is generated. People in the North County drive to Jackson. People in the West County drive to Modesto or Stockton or Lodi. People in the West or the South End drive to Sonora. We do most of our bulk shopping out of county. And so we don't get much in the way of sales tax revenue. It goes to the jurisdiction in which those sales take place.
I get that as problem number one, but I'm talking about the actual, what I understood to be the actual percentage of our sales tax revenue generated here that is returned to us versus the sales tax revenue generated in the neighboring counties returned to them. Vastly different.
Maybe their sales tax rate is higher.
Higher rate is one thing, but the percentage of the sales tax. Yeah.
So in other words, you're saying we might, if we only got 3% of our, somebody else got 5%.
It was in the 20s and 30s, yeah. Okay? Mm-hmm. Where our sales tax was returned to us at the rate of, let's say, 20%, and I believe it was Amador that was the highest, and it was something like 33%.
But a lot of that could be based on population too, and we have the lowest population. Do you think?
Not as compared
to
Amador.
I don't know anything about the sales tax rebate program or how it's distributed.
Well, with the new governor's budget, be prepared, we're not going to get anything back.
Well,
our
there was
sales
this
tax
huge disparity, and there was no explanation for it, and it does affect what we can do with transportation, circulation, a whole lot of things.
Right.
Who would look into that, what he's talking about, and how we could get our percentages adjusted if that's something that,
Well, I'm sure the treasurer tax collector probably understands that, how that works. And maybe, surely the CAO probably has a better handle on, revenue sources for the county.
So in the interest of bringing us back, because we're straying a bit, I think that's a good, discussion.
Well,
but I understand about, and maybe what we might be thinking about on 1.5 is if there were some specific implementation measure, we could incorporate it when we get to that point.
in as much as we're seeking money here in the form of grants, why can't we have a policy for seeking money that we already seeking our own money back to an equitable level? Is that not a general plan kind of a policy
Well, I
statement?
mean, you could, that seek all possible financial assistance.
I'm not talking about assistance, I'm talking about our money.
Well, I know, but isn't that the county's responsibility to make sure it gets its appropriate percentage?
I think it's the county's responsibility that its citizens get everything they're
Yes.
entitled to.
So maybe what we should do is if you think that we're not getting what we're entitled to, is that we should, instead of just putting something in the general plan, is like investigate that.
Well, I'm all for that.
Okay.
If we can.
And I am quite certain
It shouldn't
that-
need to be in the general plan to be an implementation.
I'm quite certain that our CAO and Treasurer Tax
Are on top
Collector
of that.
are looking at every
Yeah.
possible source
I
of
would
income.
imagine
And
that's-
if there's money due the county,
We're getting it.
we're working
Yeah.
to get it from the state. You know, there's all kinds of things the state has held back over the last 8, 10 years to balance their budget on the backs of the counties, and that's a whole different ballgame.
If they're going to balance it on the backs of the counties, that's a problem. I just don't want to balance it disproportionately.
Okay, all right, we're moving on.
I think that's outside the general
Yeah,
plan.
I do too. So any other comments here on policies for general?
On 2.4, at the bottom of
Okay.
page 11, it says require new development to finance and construct all off-site circulation improvements, et cetera. Should the word "and" be "or"? Because will the developer actually do all this constructing as well as paying for it, or is it okay if it just pays for it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if they don't, who would do the construction part of it? I mean, I guess if they're paying,
I guess
A
you could
benefit
say,
basis,
to finance and have constructed or something, they would be responsible for the construction if that's what's necessary. What we're trying to get at here was in some cases you actually have to have the road for that development. And so it would be their responsibility to have it constructed. It may not be them actually constructing, it could be that they pay, maybe Caltrans does the construction, or the county does the construction if it's a county project.
I'm
Or
fine with have constructed.
Pardon?
Have constructed, so it doesn't imply that they're doing the construction, but they are
Or-
going to have it.
To be responsible for, as Mr.
Yeah.
Mauer
Yeah,
mentioned.
Whichever.
it shouldn't be and.
I was just going to say finance or construct, but
I would be good with the word "or." Except for, that could leave it open quite a bit, too. It
That
should
they're going to
be-
finance
yeah,
it, or they're going to construct it, or
Right.
they're going to
Yeah.
finance it, and they need to make sure it's in constructed, right?
And be responsible to construct. Your language.
To be responsible for.
Okay.
Eliminates finance and construct.
And be responsible for construction. Right? Is that what you're saying?
No, just to be responsible for all off-site circulation improvement necessary. But that's
I
the
don't-
ball of wax.
Require new development to be responsible for all off-site
Correct.
circulation
Am I
improvements.
taking the word construct out of there, Peter? Does that?
Well, you took out
We still
finance,
covered
You
too.
can't be
Finance and
responsible for it
construct.
without, there's being some construction somewhere.
Yeah. I think that works.
Okay.
and also just a typo at the end there, and the parenthetical should be "IM" instead of just "M."
Oh, yes.
So, moving on to,
Page 12 now?
2.5, there was, I think, Commissioner Tuno had some, and then also, so did Joyce Tekel, asking for Mr. Tuno's question to be answered regarding balancing the need for improvements with historic communities. So I think that's where the addition of the designs appropriate for the unique characteristics of the community which is located addresses that, right?
That was the intent of that additional line.
Okay.
Are you on 2.5?
I am.
2.5, top of page 12.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that addresses the, within sort of the context of the community.
Say that one more time.
I believe that the addition that Peter put in addresses Joyce Teckel's concern, and I don't know if I guess it would, we'll hear from Commissioner Tuno if that addresses his concern on this.
Maybe viewed as improvements or not.
I finally found the right spot here. Thank you.
I could live with that change.
Fawn, I have to ask you to repeat yourself.
I guess what I'm asking is, does the addition that Peter have here in the underlined section of 2.5 address your comment that you had in your comment?
Yes. I have that marked as done, so I was satisfied with that.
Okay.
All right, so moving on, any other comments on this section between 2.6 and 2.13?
None from me.
Me either.
The only thing I had was on 212, where it says, implement measures to reduce travel speeds within communities and neighborhood areas to protect the historic character or special function. Special function was like, sounds like a party. I was thinking maybe like unique features or unique characteristics of the community rather than special function.
Road function, sort of a term of art that's used as to what's the purpose of that road. And
So this refers to the special function of the road? Not the
Well,
community? I guess then I'm
yeah.
reading it.
Oh, no, I guess maybe I misspoke there. Special function of the community, you're right. It does read sort of strangely. What was your
Well, to me,
thoughts?
I thought that you were getting at that we want to protect the unique characteristics or the, unique features or something of the community.
So maybe imagine special function, unique features,
Characteristics
unique
or- yeah.
characteristics.
I mean, if it was referring to the community, I think that, if it's referring, a special
Yeah.
function is a reference to the road.
Does it work if you change function to the word needs?
Change it from what to what?
Function to needs?
Special needs of the community? But he's referencing roads. I think that's what he's
Well,
doing.
no, I misread that when Fawn first brought the issue up, and so.
Didn't make sense.
Well, to me, it's like I don't know, special needs is very broad. Historic character, special, or unique features.
I think unique features probably
Yes.
would be the best.
I can
Unique
go with that.
features. Because we're already talking about historic character or unique features.
I mean, you could have something else that's not historic that necessitates,
Right.
slower traffic speeds or other, sort of traffic calming issues if it's, I think unique features provides a broad enough, category that you can look at that.
You guys good with that?
Good.
All right. So it's 5 to noon. What?
Public comment
I
on
don't
this
know, I'm
section?
going to check with them.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Should we have public comment? Okay. So at this point, anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on the goals and policies general section of the circulation element we just reviewed and revised?
Real quick, brief one. Just wanted to support 1.3 and 1.6, both in the goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled by the use of, design features, development, and other projects. I think of the, as you mentioned, the bike routes, but also shortcuts and other ways to get there. There are, lots of areas that are existing. The old roads might have been developed a certain way because the wagons went there, but there's a more efficient way to do it now. And projects have been proposed that will have like a connector road between two existing roads, and that will shorten having to go this long way around something now with having a connector road. So that would be one example for 1.3. And then in 1.6, development like infill development or community center development would reduce the vehicle miles traveled too. So I just think those are both good policies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave Haley. I'd like to just make a brief comment because you spent some time talking about it, and it's probably not germane to this subject, but the fee for, I forgot the name of the fee.
Rim fee?
RIM fee. There's other ways to get those costs assigned appropriately is to reallocate. There's $17 million that goes to Sheep Branch Road, or another 15 that goes to Pool Station Road. Are those necessary? Can they be reallocated more appropriately? So that's just a comment I have when you do get to that stage at probably some later date, but you spent some time talking about it and was concerned about it.
It's already policy.
Thank you.
I'd like to just bring your attention to SB 743.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Dennis Mills, Vallecito. And that in the past, the state has always used level of service as their guideline on impacts of state highways. And that SB 743 is going to change that to look at miles traveled instead. And this is something that is going to have about a 2-year window to implement, and that there will be offsets required, which means that you need to mitigate through public transit or bike trails or walking paths, and if they're not available within the project boundaries, you're going to have to buy offsets, or you're going to have to buy property somewhere else to make up the difference. This is something that will impact the general plan going forward, and I would like to have you just take a good close look at 743 as to how it relates to traffic circulation studies and the cost. Now, moving on to RIM fees. RIM fees as a concept might be a good idea, but at the same time, how they've been implemented and used is quite a different matter. And I defer to what Mr. Haley had said, and that when we just take those fees and we say, for instance, that a particular project has an impact to a specific road or area, and that we just throw that money into the general fund, but we don't use that money to offset that true impact to that specific spot, that's just a tax on a tax. That's really what it is. So if we're going to look at RIM fees, and we're going to be able to allocate them appropriately to the area of the road that's being impacted, that's one thing. But the way that they're currently being implemented and just being allowed it to be thrown into the general fund so that some impact fee from Coppopolis ends up in West Point fixing a road, that to me is just, that's not the right way to handle it. So I just want those two comments out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. So shall we continue, or you guys want to have lunch now, or what?
Let's do lunch.
Lunch? All right, we are recessed until 1 o'clock. Thank you.